Mark Rogers TV talking ACC football. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC. You can also join him on Fighting Gobbler, covering some Virginia Tech football. Mike, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Mark. We've been having a little issues scheduling on both of our ends, but we're finally able to sit down and talk. So I'm doing well. I mean, we're 3 weeks away from college football.
I know. We finally had to make this happen. It's been a while. Mike and I get together on a regular basis throughout the year, talking ACC football. So it was a league that was at the very top of college football at the quarterback position last year. Most of that talent's been lost. A number of stars coming back, but not necessarily enough to fill out a top five. But we're going to bring you the top five here. So, Mike, who do you think are the five best going into 2017?
Yeah, so it's a conference that's, a tale of two divisions. You have all the quarterbacks returning essentially in the Atlantic division, and then you move over to the Coastal division, and it's just the complete opposite. You have basically 1.5 quarterbacks. And the reason why I say 1.5 quarterbacks is because you have Kurt Benkert, who was kind of in and out of the starting lineup for University of Virginia last year. And then you have Daniel Jones, who is really strong for Duke. And then the Atlantic division, it's a lot of the same characters. You got Lamar Jackson at Louisville, Deondre Francois at Florida State. Obviously, losing Deshaun Watson takes a lot away from Clemson, we think, but they got a lot of talent there at the quarterback position, from Kelly Bryant to the freshman Hunter Johnson. So, it's going to be a very talented quarterback-laden conference. It's just going to be a lot of players that are kind of unknown at this point. So for the top five for me, it has to consist of the guys that you know about versus the guys you don't know about that could end up emerging here with their respective programs. So number 5 for me is NC State quarterback Ryan Finley. And Ryan Finley transferred in from Boise State last year and was really good for the Wolfpack. And NC State really had an up and down year, obviously a really strong first month and a half, and then they kind of dropped off towards the end of the year before upsetting North Carolina in the season finale. But Ryan Finley had a really strong year for NC State. A lot of people thought that it would be Jalen McClendon's job once Jacoby Brissett left a few years back and moved on to the NFL. But Ryan Finley came in as a transfer, completed 60% of his passes last year, 18 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, threw for 3,700 yards. And he's my number 5 rated quarterback in the conference heading into 2017 season because he does have the experience. I think the NC State offense is returning nearly everybody except for Matt Days at running back, and I think that NC State's going to be very explosive on that side of the football. I think Finley's going to be primed for another strong year. Number 4 for me, and this is a testament to another guy who just kind of came out of nowhere. It's Eric Dungy, the junior at Syracuse. Last year, in 2016, he looked like a completely different player, and it was really a testament to how well Dino Babers came in and ran, coached the team up on the offense in his first year with the Orange. Eric Dungy was a product of that really strong, fast-paced offense that Syracuse had. He completed 65% of his passes last year for 2,700 yards, 15 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. A real gunslinger at the position there. He did get hurt about 3/4 of the way through his season, so I'm really interested to see how those numbers project if he's healthy for an entire year. But Eric Dungy, definitely a product of the system he's in, but he's a big-time quarterback, has a huge arm, very athletic as well. He can do a little bit of running as well, running and throwing the football. Had 6 touchdowns on the ground last year for Syracuse, and that offense should be really, really good once again. Number 3 for me, and I'm really high on this player. He was a true freshman last year for Duke. It's Daniel Jones. You'll remember last year Duke had Thomas Sirk at the quarterback position, and then he blew out his Achilles for, I believe, the second or third time that happened, and Daniel Jones came in as a true freshman. They had a revolving door at running back because everybody was hurt. Offensive line was hurt. And Daniel Jones, all he did was complete 63% of his passes as a true freshman, 2,800 yards, and 16 touchdown passes to only 9 interceptions. Imagine if Daniel Jones had a full supporting cast around him, how good he can be. And Duke's hoping that they do have a better supporting cast around him this year, a better offensive line, and hopefully a more healthy running game as well. And if Daniel Jones and that offense get those things going for them this season, I think Duke's going to be in really good shape. And I'm really high on Daniel Jones, not only for the quarterback that I saw last year when the going got tough, but because of what I think he can be moving forward there for Duke. Duke's a program that's had pretty strong quarterback play over the last few years, at least relative to the Duke of old. And I think Daniel Jones is the best quarterback that David Cutcliffe's had since he's been there for the Blue Devils. Number 2 on my list is Deondre Francois. And Deondre Francois at Florida State is primed for a big year. He was another kid that came in last year, was a redshirt freshman for the Seminoles, completed 58% of his passes. But a lot, he was victim of a lot of drops too in the receiving game. So that's really kind of what plagued him. He was getting killed back there as well. Offensive line play wasn't as strong as they wanted to be at Florida State, but Francois threw for 3,300 yards, 20 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. Francois took care of the football last year, and that's the biggest thing to watch out of a freshman. He was poised in the pocket. He was getting killed, kept getting back up. Obviously, what he did against Michigan in the bowl game, nobody's going to forget that anytime soon. I mean, Francois was literally getting picked up off the turf by his teammates, and all he did was lead Florida State down for the game-winning touchdown in the final drive. So, Deondre Francois, primed for a big year for Florida State. But number 1 for me is the reigning Heisman winner, and he might be the least hyped returning Heisman winner I've ever seen. I mean, he's getting no love whatsoever, despite putting up video game numbers last year, and that's, of course, Lamar Jackson at Louisville. Completed 56% of his passes last year, 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns to only 9 interceptions. He had 1,500 yards rushing on the ground and 21 touchdowns. The guy's an absolute machine, and that offensive line, we're talking about the offensive line at Florida State and Duke being bad. The offensive line at Louisville was absolutely abysmal. It's a miracle that Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy behind that offensive line. That's how bad it was. Running game wasn't great as well. He produced a lot of offense by himself, and he's a major reason why Louisville had the year that they had last year. Obviously, the Cardinals are striving to kind of finish things off this year a little bit better than they did last year when they got off to such a strong start. They were one of the top teams in the country. Then they slipped down the stretch, lost 3 straight to end the year. And when you lose an out-of-conference game to Houston, and that was supposed to be a big game at the beginning of the year, and then Houston was kind of up and down in Tom Herman's final year there with the Cougars. You lose that game. You lose the game the following week in a rivalry game against Kentucky, and then you get completely housed by LSU in the bowl game. Louisville's hoping to kind of right the ship here to begin this season and push forward, and they have some unfinished business. So I'm really interested to see how Lamar Jackson responds to not only that, but the fact that he hasn't been hyped up at all as a reigning Heisman winner. So that's my top 5 in the ACC, and I think there are going to be some other guys that could eventually emerge into the mix, but there's so many unknowns in the conference right now. I think you have to go with those 5 just because they're the known commodities.
Mark Rogers TV talking top 5 quarterbacks in the ACC with Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC and also Fighting Gobbler. So I'll go with my top 5. But before I do, Mike, I got a couple questions for you. So when you compile it, especially a quarterback list, it's interesting to me because some people are projecting statistics and they're thinking, I am projecting, I'm looking at offensive personnel around the quarterback, playmakers, offensive line, style of offense. And I think these quarterbacks are going to turn in the best statistical years 1 through 5. Other people like myself think, and I'll make this example, Tom Brady gets traded to the worst offense in the NFL. His numbers are going to suffer, but he's still the same player. So I would try to see through that and still rate Tom Brady the best or second best quarterback in the NFL. So which approach do you take?
So that's an interesting question. I think it's a little bit of both approaches because I think with some guys you have the known commodity, you know that the playmaker is going to be around him. That's like the Deondre Francois case, right? Or the Lamar Jackson case. You know that he's going to have really good receivers, but you're so unsure about the offensive lines with so many of these quarterbacks I just mentioned that you kind of have to temper expectations because you're not exactly sure what to expect. The skill position players are going to be really good, but is the running game going to be good? So in Daniel Jones's case, is the running game going to be strong? Is the offensive line going to be better? Because Daniel Jones, the quarterback, by himself last year was fantastic in what I consider to be a pretty poor offense. Didn't have the talent at receiver. The line struggled. Running backs were hurt. Daniel Jones was producing a lot of offense by himself. The same can be said for Lamar Jackson when the offensive line got really bad towards the end of the year. Of course, he had some of his worst games down the stretch, which is problematic, but you take his stats into consideration, what he did against big-time opponents such as the Florida State. So It's a little bit of both. It depends on what you have coming back, especially the skill positions, and then what's going on with the offensive line and the help around you, because of course a quarterback is only as strong as his offensive line. And there are a lot of unknowns, at least with these ACC quarterbacks here, as far as the offensive lines are concerned. I think all 5 of these quarterbacks would like to have their offensive lines take a step forward heading into 2017.
All right, so my top 5 going into 2017, I started number 5 with Daniel Jones. Mike has sold me on Daniel a number of times. We've had the discussions about what he brings to the quarterback position at Duke. I have seen the highlights. I've yet to see, a bulk of a game with Daniel Jones at the helm. So I look forward to seeing some Duke football. I know they've got back-to-back intriguing games in September with Northwestern and Baylor coming to town. So Duke, for once, should get a little bit of attention in the non-conference season. Daniel Jones, certainly a playmaker at Duke, and if he gets any kind of support, as Mike is talking about, he should have a big year for David Cutcliffe. And, of course, he's in the right spot, meaning David Cutcliffe can handle quarterbacks with the best of them and has a track record of being able to develop quarterbacks, and Daniel Jones being in the right place in terms of coaching stability and coaching knowledge at that position, but not necessarily the personnel around him, although Duke's recruiting classes recently have taken a step in the right direction. I've got Ryan Finley at number 4. North Carolina State could have a big year trying to break into that top 3 slots. That is very difficult to do in their division. They've got a big game against South Carolina in the opener. Ryan Finley, a guy that's going to be able to open it up, and Jalen Samuels is going to be key to his emergence and continuing to develop after a nice season, not a great season, but a strong season in his first one with the Wolfpack. All right, at number 3, Mike, I'm going with the complete wild card in the entire conference, and that's N'Kosi Perry. So he has not officially won the job yet, but this kid has all the talent in the world, and much is expected of him, and Canes fans cannot wait to see him on the field. So he is the favorite of Miami fans to win the job and get the call. He will have 2 warm-up games before we see him against that vaunted Florida State defense, which I think is arguably the most talented defense in college football. And yes, he is a freshman. He doesn't have the track record or the experience for me to rate him. But I do want to remind anyone, just off the top of my head, you got Jake Browning at Washington, who started and played well as a freshman. Josh Rosen with a big freshman season at UCLA. Some of these did have the redshirt year behind them. Some did not. J.T. Barrett won a national championship, or at least got the Buckeyes to the playoffs at Ohio State. Brad Kaya, of course, the predecessor, played as a freshman at Miami. Deshaun Watson, of course, was nicked up as a freshman, didn't complete the season start to finish, but 14 TDs, 2 picks. And if N'Kosi Perry can come anywhere near the legacy of Deshaun Watson, he will have done something. And we saw actually Jalen Hurts, despite the loss in the championship game and a lot of the knocks that he took for not being a great pocket passer, he was just a freshman, got his team, albeit Alabama's got the best talent in college football, to the championship game, and actually really did not have a hand in the loss because he led the tie down the field for 2 drives the last 2 times he had the ball. So it is possible in this day and age, with the number of reps that these kids get in high school at elite schools, and with all the summer camps and all the tutelage, to come in and be ready. And this kid supposedly is the talent to do so at number 3. Lamar Jackson, Louisville, best athlete at quarterback in the country. Best athlete at quarterback in the country. I don't think he's the best quarterback in the conference. I know I'm in the minority there. Mike, you talked about the 3 losses that Louisville suffered. They cannot be pinned entirely on Lamar Jackson. He was to blame partially, but the offensive line just couldn't. Really was disappointing in the Houston game in particular, and against Kentucky, because the Wildcats do not have a good defense, and that was seen against a couple other ACC opponents. But against LSU, they were just lined up against an NFL front 7 and just couldn't handle them, and Lamar Jackson didn't have a chance. So his stats, like many people at his position, inflated by racking up 6 or 7 touchdowns against the likes of Syracuse on a weekly basis, did have a big game against a stellar Clemson defense, almost won it, had a fourth down play where his receiver couldn't get the first down inside the 10-yard line, or maybe he pulls off the upset against the eventual national champ. So Lamar Jackson, I give him all the credit for winning the Heisman. Statistically, he was the best quarterback in the country last year. But I like number one just a little bit better because I think he's more of a complete quarterback. And what I would like to see out of the quarterback position, Deondre Francois of Florida State. Yeah, the offensive line troubling at Florida State. They think they have it fixed, and they will need to if they are to fulfill the expectations that we expect out of Florida State. And after 2 consecutive losses to Clemson, the expectation is that they get over that hurdle. It was just sometime this week, Mike, that I came across the last couple drives at the Clemson-Florida State game, and despite Florida State getting off to that 5-3 start that's not indicative of Florida State, one of those losses inexplicably to Louisville when they just got annihilated. They took Clemson to the wire, and that was the eventual best team in the country. And so I think they're going to fix the offensive line. He does lose Rudolph and Whitfield at the wide receiver position, but I think he's ready to go and going to turn in an exceptional year. And you mentioned the beating that he took as a freshman and consistently came off the deck. The Michigan game in the Orange Bowl was prime example of that, leading his team to a comeback victory in the waning seconds. So my top 5, Jones at 5, Finley at 4, N'Kosi Perry, the wild card at number 3, Lamar Jackson, the Heisman Trophy winner at number 2, and Francois at number 1. Is there somebody off this list, your top 5, Mike, that you're intrigued by, who could really break out and have a big year or could stay back in the pack?
So there are 3 guys. One is N'Kosi Perry, who you already mentioned at Miami. I think he'll eventually be the starting quarterback there. I'm not sure when it'll be. It could be the opener. It could be a quarter of the way through the season. It could be later in the year. Who knows? It really depends on what kind of start Miami gets off to, especially offensively. So I'm really intrigued by him. I'm intrigued by Hunter Johnson at Clemson, best quarterback in the country in this past recruiting class. I think Kelly Bryant probably begins the season as a starter for Clemson, but I think that Hunter Johnson is eventually going to be the guy to be the starter there. You don't get the number 1 quarterback in the nation to come in and be a backup, so I'm really interested to see how that plays out. Josh Jackson at Virginia Tech is another one. It's an easy offense to pick up under Coach Fuente. Maybe the players won't agree. Remains to be seen, right? But Gerard Evans came in last year. He was not an FBS quarterback, came in from a junior college, picked up the offense, played extremely well. Josh Jackson, highly touted recruit, was a 4-star ranked prospect out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, ended up going from his stomping grounds. He could have easily gone to the University of Michigan, came down to Blacksburg to play at Virginia Tech. He's in all likelihood going to be a starting quarterback when the season kicks off in 3 weeks against West Virginia. I think he's a guy who can slide in, play really well, similar to what Gerard Evans did last year, and be an important quarterback and an important player for the Hokies. So those are 3 quarterbacks, I think. They're all young. They're all unknowns. They're all in a fight for the starting quarterback job. So if they win the starting quarterback job and they're as good as advertised, I think that they could slide into the top 5 by season's end.
If we rewind the calendar, Mike, 1 year, Max Brown was lining up for USC against Alabama in a highly anticipated game. And then if we would have said, okay, USC is going to finish in the top 5 in the country and win the Rose Bowl, we would think, okay, Max Brown has just fulfilled his potential because he came to USC as a 5-star. And if you know anything about recruiting rankings, you know that 4-star athletes are hard to come by, but there are hundreds of them. There's usually like 30 or 40 5-star guys at all the positions each year, and Max Brown was one of those guys. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it through the Bama game in one piece. And Sam Darnold, of course, was credited with the 10 wins and won the Rose Bowl. And Max Brown finds himself at Pitt, unfortunately for him, without Matt Canada and James Conner and a number of people in place last year that led the Panthers to a ton of points scored and a pretty dynamic offense. So I'm interested to see what Max Brown can do with a new lease on life.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's going to be an interesting offense. They still have Quadri Henderson at receiver, who runs the ball a bit too, and he's just a very dynamic player. Quadri Allison, who was the starting running back there for Pittsburgh 2 years ago, and then James Conner came back, and Allison took a back seat last season. I think Allison could be every bit as good as he was freshman year, and if he is, I think Pittsburgh's going to be in a really good spot, no matter who the quarterback is. But a good running game would really help out Max Brown, and I think that Pittsburgh will be able to do that either from the conventional way with Allison or by handing the ball off to Henderson and being a dynamic offense. But losing offensive coordinator Matt Canada, I think, is the biggest loss for Pittsburgh. It's not Nate Peterman, it's not James Conner. I think the biggest loss is Matt Canada because the offense he brought to the table and how dynamic Pittsburgh was last season.
Talking quarterback play in the ACC with Mike McDaniel from Fighting Gobbler and also inside the ACC. Mike, where can we find your podcast with Joey Weaver?
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter at BC Podcast ACC, and we've been doing our season previews, all the teams in the conference. So take a look at that. Also, check out Basketball Conference Podcast. We're on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes. We're on Google Play. Go find us. We got a bunch of the old guys back together, Mark, from the Mark Rogers TV days when we were in our heyday with all the ACC guys on one show. And now we all do our individual stuff with you still. But, yeah, we've grabbed a lot of guys to do the individual previews. Dan Rubin for Boston College, Cam Underwood for Miami. So Jim Hammett from Pittsburgh. I mean, the list goes on and on. So we got all the cast of characters there. And we've been doing season previews. And, people have been listening. Hopefully I can grab some more listens here and people will continue to enjoy what we're doing.
That is beautiful. It is a great listen. No question about that. And I know you guys are in the midst of breaking down the ACC and previewing every team heading into 2017. And so for me, simply Mark Rogers. You can catch me on Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. Those are the audio podcasts. Just search Mark Rogers TV or on YouTube as well. All right, Mike, good discussion. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, Mark.